Hello, it's Mr. Egg here. I got a message from a friend who I've known for about 15 years the other day, and he's living now here in Pattaya, and he said, let's go for a coffee. I said, all right, no problem. And when we got there, Paul, his name was Paul, told me that he was enjoying all the stuff on YouTube. It's very nice. And he also liked the live streams. And he'd noticed that some of the comments in the comments section on the videos and on the live streams were where some of the viewers wanted to submit their own stories for me to tell, which involved Pattaya, and especially romantic stories, love stories. And we started talking then about, on the British radio, the main national pop radio station, Radio 1, on a weekday morning there was a presenter called Simon Bates, and I've actually had the pleasure of introducing Simon Bates on stage once when I was a DJ back in England. So we were chatting about this, and to my surprise, he kind of pulled out this exercise book. And Paul, my friend Paul, had written a love story, true love story, that happened right here in Pattaya in 2005. At about that time, Paul was in his early 40s. He was on his first trip to Pattaya. He'd got a good job in London, and he'd just become single. So he'd come to Pattaya and he was looking for love. And I remember bumping into him on that very first trip, and Paul said to me, what is he said? He said, where can I find the normal rules girls? And I says, Paul, this is Pattaya. There are no rules. And I tried to encourage him to just relax, enjoy his 2 weeks here, have a bit of fun in a naughty nightlife, and not worry too much about romance. Paul and I had a lot in common, actually. We were both born in the same hospital, although I've got to say several years apart, in Birmingham, and that was our hometown. Paul was staying at the Best Beach Villa Hotel. It was a 3-star hotel in Soi 5, and in fact, those eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that's exactly where we are now, outside the Best Beach Villa. And when he came in here, his first day in Pattaya, he was checked in at reception by the front desk manager, who we later found out to be a lady called Rose. He said that the hotel was 3-star, very, very basic. He certainly liked it because there was a swimming pool. He could relax at the swimming pool during the day. And he noticed that the staff were very attentive and very, very friendly towards him and all the other guests in the hotel. Now, of course, it was Paul's first trip here to Thailand, so he didn't realise is that this kind of friendliness is what makes Thailand very special. But at the time, Paul was really swept away by that, and he got to notice the front desk manager, Rose, a lot more than the other staff. He got the feeling that the little chats that they were having every day were a little bit more than just her being attentive towards guests. He was getting the feeling that maybe she was interested in him, but he'd spent most of his day just lying on the beach or by the pool. In fact, Rose had commented to Paul that he was the only guest in the house that hadn't took a girl back with him into the hotel. And she quite liked that characteristic about him. And that conversation had really stuck in Paul's mind. Well, the holiday progressed over the next few days, and Paul found himself getting more and more attracted to Rose, who was the front desk manager. He even started changing his routine a little bit, so that when he came into the hotel and left the hotel, he would deliberately bump into her and they'd have a little chat together. And one day he plucked up the courage and he said that he was going to be free that evening, and asked her what she was doing after work, because her shift finished at 6 o'clock. And Rose told him that she was quite flattered and that she'd love to take Paul for a dinner in Jomtien. Now that was amazing to Paul, because he'd been restricted as a tourist to the BART bus route, going up Second Road and along Beach Road, and so a trip with a Thai girl, Rose, was an adventure. So 6 o'clock came and Paul climbed into Rose's car, which was a Toyota Albis, and he found himself with Rose alone, driving along the road towards Jomtien and past Jomtien to a little fish restaurant. And when he got there, he was really excited, and he didn't think it was really the time to tell Rose that he was actually allergic to fish and also shellfish. And when he ate any of those fish products, he came out in a nasty rash on his arms. But he didn't care, because he was alone with his dream girl on a romantic dinner, and it was normal rules. The dinner date was going really well, because one of the great things about Rose was that she spoke almost perfect English. And that was for a couple of reasons. First of all, she'd been at university in her home province of Korat, or Nakhon Ratchasima, where she'd studied hospitality and tourism management. And also, Paul that night learned a little bit about her past. She'd been married to an English gentleman in the United Kingdom, and she'd been to the UK and lived there. Unfortunately, that relationship had broken down because her ex-husband was very violent towards her. And she'd then come back to Thailand and was now working at the Best Beach Villa Hotel. So they drove back home, and Paul got dropped off here at the hotel by Rose, and there was just a peck on the cheek. That's about as romantic as it got. And they both agreed that they'd like to have another night out together. But there was just one problem. It was flight number TG 916, Thai Airways flight from Bangkok to London, which was taking off the next day at midday. And how many times has this happened, where you've had a holiday and you've finally met your dream girl, and then the next day you've got to go back? Now, Paul secretly hoped that Rose could take him to the airport, but unfortunately her work commitments meant that she had a shift that morning, so that he couldn't go. But anyway, he was soon off to Bangkok airport. Just before he went, they had a romantic goodbye right here on the terrace, and Paul gave her his business card, and he made a light comment that if you're ever in London, I'll take you out to the swankiest restaurant in the whole of town. And with that, they said their goodbyes, and he was gone. He was soon on his seat, 61C, in an aisle, on the Thai Airways flight back to London. And pretty soon, he was back to his usual routine. He had a very good job in central London on the Strand at a place that you may know, Somerset House. It featured in one of the James Bond films when James Bond was jumping out of a window. It should have been like a Russian building, but it was actually filmed at Somerset House where Paul worked in London, and he was there when that was filmed. You also might know Somerset House because every Christmas time there's a courtyard, very, very large courtyard inside, and every year they build an ice rink where it turns into a public skating rink where you can go and skate. So Paul was back in London. His job was advising ministers in the government of daily matters, and he was back to the humdrum of his job, but secretly, in the back of his mind, he was planning his next trip to Pattaya. It was during this time, about 4 months after his first trip, that Paul got a very big surprise. He was sitting at work and the phone rang. He picked it up and there was a voice on the other end, and it says, "Hi, it's me. Do you remember me?" And he instantly recognised it as a Thai voice. And it was clearly Rose. And Paul says, "Yeah, hi." He was so pleased that she'd got in touch with him, and he was quite amazed because back in 2005, calling from Thailand to London must have been very expensive. And Rose said, "Hi, do you remember you said to me that if I was ever in London that I should give you a call? Well, right now I'm at Waterloo Station. Can you come and pick me up?" I'll tell you what happened next week.